Hey guys, it's Minty here, and if you like horror movies and horror comics with extra slashings of 80s cheese, then boy, today do we have the movie for you! In 1982, Creepshow came out, an anthology movie comprised of 5 horror tales that pays homage to classic horror comics. Directed by George A. Romero and written by Stephen King, the 5 stories include a grumpy old man coming back from the grave to seek revenge on the family members who killed him, some weird farmer played by King himself who has a meteor crash land on his property, and after touching it, he starts to get weird green meteor shit growing all over his body. And no, that's not me trying to be funny, that's exactly how the movie explains the stuff.
Meteor shit!
A disgruntled old man played by Leslie Nielsen torments his ex-wife's new lover played by Ted Danson and makes him bury himself in the sand with an approaching tide. A university party which gets invaded by a fluffy fur beast who has a taste for blood. And finally, a rich eccentric old man who is paranoid about filth and germs, whose house gets taken over by cockroaches, in which they end up eating him from the inside out. What's not to love about this movie? It's awful, but it's awesome at the same time, and can only exist in the 80s, and also features Ed Harris doing some terrible disco dancing. Sheer brilliance. So, time to dust off the old horror comics as we examine this classic anthology movie, as we look into 10 things that you may not know about Creepshow. Let's check it out.
I've got this bug problem. Once you get bugs, you never get rid of them. Breed in the crawl spaces.
Number 10, Cockroach Currency. Despite the fact that Creepshow is a special effects heavy movie with optical effects and quite impressive makeup effects along with a more than impressive cast of big names, you may be shocked to learn that all the special effects used in the movie, along with the famous actors for that matter, were not the most expensive part of the movie. George A. Romero said that the most expensive part of making the movie was all the cockroaches that were used in the movie's 5th and final segment, They're Creeping Up on You. He said that the pesky little insects were 50 cents a piece, and considering just how many cockroaches you see in the movie, it kind of makes sense that it would have cost a fortune. So who would have thought that out of all the monsters, zombies, and Stephen King's green beard, that the most expensive part of the movie were these little bugs? And each cockroach more than earned its 50 cents of performing in front of the camera. Number 9, the farting antics of Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen plays a wealthy psychopath, Richard Vickers, in the movie's 3rd segment, Something to Tide You Over, where we learn he doesn't like people running off with his ex-wife, especially if they are Ted Danson. And, well, Nielsen is surprisingly intimidating in the role.
Jump into that hole. Then you forced me to shoot you, Harry.
Despite the fact that Nielsen plays quite a sinister role in Creepshow, which is a departure from his usual more comical roles, he was still quite the funny man behind the camera, as Nielsen had a fart machine in his pocket during the making of the film, which is a little gadget which would make farting noises. And Nielsen would unleash the comic flatulence sound effect just before shooting during the rehearsals, which apparently left the whole set in fits of laughter. The irony being is that everyone on screen looks so serious, so it's hard to imagine that just before filming their take, they were hearing funny farts. Number 8, Stephen King's makeup perils. The second segment in the movie, The Loathsome Death of Geordie Verrill, which by the way is based on the short story Weeds, King plays a dim-witted farmer Geordie, who bears witness to a meteor crash landing on his property, and after touching the strange ball from space, King starts to increasingly have a strange green plant-like growth consume his body.
Meteor ship!
So, yes, throughout this segment, we literally see Stephen King slowly transform into a big green bush. Now that's an interesting sentence. However, King suffered allergic reactions to the makeup, and in order to keep filming, he had to frequently be using medication and be given shots. The irony being is the growth was also irritating the Geordie character and causing him to itch, so maybe in those scenes, King wasn't acting. Number 7, a segment for Creepshow 2 might have been used in the movie. The last segment in Creepshow, They're Creeping Up on You, was pretty ambitious. What with working with all the cockroaches and the impressive, almost hospital-style mansion set, along with the interesting camera angles, and of course the memorable death scene at the end. King and Romero knew that this one was going to require a bit more work on it than the other segments, and had it proven to be too difficult to film, then their plan B would have been to have the final segment in the movie be based on the story The Hitcher, which was the story used in the following Creepshow movie. But thankfully they managed to pull off They Keep Creeping Up on You, and The Hitcher would go on to be used in the last segment in Creepshow 2. Number 6, Creepshow was part of a trend of anthology movies in the 80s. Creepshow wasn't unique of its format being a cinematic movie based on mini segments. In fact, they were quite popular throughout the 80s. Creepshow wasn't the first. That honour belongs to Heavy Metal and the Monsters Club. Although I like to think that Creepshow's success piqued the popularity of the anthology movies, as the following year in 1983, the Twilight Zone movie came out, and then in 1984 Cat's Eye was released, which was actually another Stephen King-based anthology movie. By the way, the second story in Cat's Eye is very similar to the third story in Creepshow, in which a wealthy old man seeks sinister revenge on a younger man for stealing his wife, and gets him to perform dangerous tasks. Did King plagiarize himself? In fact, it could probably be argued that the anthology's movies led to the popular anthology TV shows that would follow, like the Twilight Zone revival, Amazing Stories, and Tales from the Crypt. Number 5, the furry monster's surprisingly cute name. In the third segment, The Crate, we see this fierce, bloodthirsty monster from Antarctica, which truly looks like something from Rocious and Out of This World, who has a taste for human flesh. Yes indeed, you wouldn't want this beast monster to walk on you while you're sitting on the toilet. However, the nickname given to the beast by George A. Romero behind the cameras was Fluffy. Yeah, I'm just glad it was a joke that stayed behind the camera, because I honestly don't know how I would have reacted to this beast monster if it was called Fluffy. Fluffy was also an achievement for special effects super genius Tom Savini, as it was the first fully animatronic puppet that he made. I ask, is there anything Savini can't do? Number 4, Stephen King's Star Wars Toys of Luck. It is revealed that King carried an action figure of the character Guido from Star Wars around with him on the set to bring the movie good luck. Now, not to question the zen of King or anything, but considering Guido brutally dies at the hand of Han Solo within the first few minutes of meeting the character, I don't know how on earth that could possibly bring good luck. And yes, Han shot first. I mean, wouldn't it have made more sense to have an action figurine of Han Solo for good luck? But hey, who am I to question the ways of Stephen King? After all, the movie was very successful, which leads me to my next issue. Number 3, Warner Brothers didn't have much faith in the movie. For some reason, Warner Brothers didn't think Creepshow was going to do too well upon its release, so rather than release the movie outright, they decided to open it in a few movie theatres in Boston first, giving it a short trial run. But after the screenings proved successful, they released the movie outright, and it paid off too, as it was the first movie George A. Romero worked on that reached #1 at a weekend box office.
Father's Day, I got my cake.
So, yes, Romero has directed many memorable films, such as Night of the Living Dead and Day of the Dead. But it was Creepshow which landed him his weekend box office crowning victory. Although Romero claims that Warner still cut a good 10 minutes out of the movie. In addition to that, the movie was competing against Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. But thankfully for Creepshow, fans were put off by that movie due to the absence of Michael Myers. So, the lack of Myers may have saved the day for Creepshow. And for the record, both Halloween 3 and Creepshow star legendary actor Tom Atkins. Number 2, alternative casting. Supposedly, and I do mean supposedly, there was another actor considered for the role of the creepy Upson Pratt. So take this info with a grain of salt. But apparently Max von Sydow was considered for the part, which quite frankly would have been awesome. But hey, he was probably too busy helping Dennis Quaid go into dreams at the time. So the part ended up being played by E.G. Marshall, who also played the President in Superman 2, along with his amazing wig, and would go on to star in another Stephen King project, the Tommyknockers miniseries. And Max von Sydow would also go on to star in another Stephen King related movie, Needful Things. Number 1, the movie spawned a graphic novel. Well, yeah, who would have thought that a movie about comic books would have actually led to a comic book? I know, far out, right? However, this is more interesting than your usual comic book adaptation, as this one was actually written by Stephen King. The same year the movie came out, so did this graphic novel, which retells the segments seen in the movie in comic book panel format. And to be honest, the book is beautifully illustrated, perfectly recapturing the mood of the movie, and actually shows scenes that wouldn't have been able to have been filmed for the movie, such as Ted Dancer's head underwater. Any collector or fan should own this graphic novel. Not bad. Anyway, that be my look into this different horror movie, Creepshow. A breath of fresh air from your usual run-of-the-mill horror movie. I think it's a shame that horror anthology movies don't really happen anymore, because I find them to be lots of fun. But in the meantime, we'll always have Creepshow to enjoy. Although it's not a perfect movie, it's still a perfectly enjoyable movie. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to buy the Creepshow graphic novel before I'm forced to hand in my geek membership card. See ya!